Good afternoon, council members and members of the public joining us for this meeting. I am Giselle Sanchez. I am acting as the council coordination manager here at the California Interagency Council of Homelessness, and I have the pleasure of opening our meeting today. Thank you for your commitment in our efforts to prevent and end homelessness in California and for joining us today. A few reminders before we begin. This is a 3-hour meeting, and while we will do our best to keep to this time frame, there is a possibility we may go over that timing slightly. Prior to this meeting, council members were provided with a briefing packet, which also includes which is also available to the public on our website. There is one more addition to the packet council members received, which is the updated data quarterly report. We will try to leave some time for council members to ask general questions towards the end of this meeting, but if we run out of time, please feel free to reach out to CalICH staff with any questions after the meeting. Okay, there we go. For today's agenda, we have our call to order, our tribal land acknowledgement, and a roll call, the consent calendar. Then we will hear from our council co-chairs, our executive officer, the advisory committee updates, the Live Experience Advisory Board updates, standing business, and working groups. And then general public comments, and then final remarks and adjournment. There will be an opportunity for general public comment at the end of this meeting. We will allow for a maximum of 2 minutes for each comment. We welcome all public comments and feedback. However, due to the structure of the public meeting we are in, we may not be able to respond to them. For this reason, if you have any specific questions that you would like answered, we ask that you please email us at calich@bcsh.ca.gov. With that, the California Interagency Council of Homelessness is hereby called to order on this day, December 3rd, 2025 at 1:12 p.m. I will now pass it to CalICH Tribal Liaison, Vivila Blossom Bear, to read the tribal land acknowledgement.
Thank you. We wish to acknowledge that Sacramento is the unceded homeland of the Southern Maidu, Valley and Plains Miwok, the Nisinan people, the Patwin Wintun people, and members of the Wilton Rancheria tribe who have inhabited this landscape since time immemorial. We extend our gratitude to the ancestors of all California Native American tribes and their descendants, as we recognize that wherever we're joining from, we're all on California Native American land. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivila. Sorry for technical difficulties. All right. This will be our attendance roll call. Give me a second. Perfect. This is our attendance roll call for the council. We need a majority of members or a quorum to officially meet and hold this meeting. Council members, after I call your name, please say present or here. Apologies if I mispronounce any names. Designees, please state your name and for the record when I call your council member. All right. Tamika Moss. Kim Johnson. Michelle Bass. Stephanie Clendenin. Susan Damaris. Dina El-Tawansi. Margaret Cushel. Veronica Lewis.
Present.
Jeff McCumber. Erica Pan. Kaina Pereira. Kim Rutledge. Thank you. Tony Sturridge. Lindsay Sin. Christina Schneider-Ashtari. Rowena Tumaneng. Jennifer Troya. Gustavo Velasquez. Nancy Ward. Marina Wyatt. Thank you. And Michelle Bass. Thank you. Yes,
designate.
thank you. Right, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 members in person. Thank you so much. So as we have a quorum, I will move us to the next agenda item. Is agenda item 2, the consent calendar. The consent calendar is for regular and non-controversial items that need to be approved by the council via a vote. While we do not expect discussion from members, the council may engage in discussion on any items on the consent calendar if they so choose. We have one item, the adoption of the September 3rd, 2025 council meeting summary. Are there any comments from council members? Great. Since this is an action item that will result in a vote, we will now open it up to public comment. Please keep comments to items on the consent calendar only. If your comment is not related to the consent calendar, there'll be time for public comment at the end of this meeting. If you're connected through Zoom, select the raise hand icon. For those joining us by phone, please press *9 to indicate you would like to comment. You'll be instructed to unmute yourself and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment. If you're joining us in person, please raise your hand if you have a comment. All right. Are there any public comments for September 3rd, 2025 council meeting summary? All right. Seeing no hands raised, do we have a motion to adopt from the council? Thank you. We have a motion and a second. So we will be voting through raised hands. As a reminder, only council members will vote. If you are a designee for a council member, please keep your hands lowered. The categories will be as followed: yes, no, and abstain. Council members, if you're voting yes, please raise your hand. We have 9 votes for. If you're abstaining, please raise your hand. 2, and then if you are voting no. All right. I believe the motion does not pass since we did not have a majority. So we could put it on the next council meeting agenda.
That's a first.
Giselle, am I able to vote online?
Veronica, did you give her?
I believe members joining virtually cannot vote. So apologies, Veronica.
That's okay. And also, we can't hear any of the council members, so if you can all can make sure the mics are on.
Yeah, the mics are definitely on in the room. This is our first time in this space. It is a lovely brand new building, but we're adapting to the technology and sort of the features. So just as a reminder for council members to speak out and up when you make comments. Veronica, is that any better?
We can hear you clearly. I just when we were doing roll call, we didn't hear any of them. So
Thank you.
All right. You could also check the microphones. I will move us on to the next agenda item. All right. We'll now turn it to co-chair opening remarks. We could start with Ms. Tamika Moss. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Great to see you all. Glad to be back together in our final month of the year. It is not only our final month of the year, it's also my birthday month. It's the best month of the year. And just last December, we unanimously voted on our statewide action plan. So really excited about the progress we're making. Just a reminder, it's our 3-year action plan with integrated performance metrics really for the first time, which I think is super exciting for California and our local partners. The goals, of course, helping folks leave unsheltered homelessness, helping more people move into housing, ensuring people do not experience homelessness again, preventing more people from experiencing homelessness, and creating more housing. And just want to acknowledge the work of ICH's staff in its ability to now collect the data through HDIS. It is extraordinary. It is one of the first systems of its kind in the nation, and it allows us to now have chronological data that we're going to be able to assess over the time of the action plan. So just kudos to all of you, and kudos to the staff for our ability to implement this work. I would be remiss not to also reflect on where we started at the end of 2025 with our horrible wildfires in Los Angeles, how everybody around this table, your teams activated under the governor's direction to really support our neighbors to the south. And it has been extraordinary work as survivors begin rebuilding. We continue to be engaged in those efforts. Cynthia Stein in the governor's office has really is now leading the governor's work on that with many of us. So thank you for your continued work on helping the survivors of the wildfires rebuild and get back to normalcy in their communities. So just felt like that was a milestone of work that was unexpected, and certainly just reminds us how important it is to think about our disaster recovery response. Certainly, I would also be remiss not to acknowledge OES and Director Ward's leadership in guiding all of us through that process in partnership with Secretary Johnson and many of you. It really was kind of an incredible effort to see what happens when we're all experiencing horrors like we did in January. So thank you for that. I know today a lot of our meeting will be talking about the federal threats. I have said to Secretary Johnson, for years, nobody cared about housing, and it's fine. And now it's important and good. But to think about the dramatic effects that Californians are experiencing with the federal funding cuts, both to housing, to health, to transportation, all of the risks that we are experiencing as a state. Theme of our conversation today, really hearing from you all how you're preparing your teams and departments to make sure that Californians are protected. Certainly at BCSH, we are having regular conversations about what our role is in protecting Californians from the assaults from the federal government. Most recently, the legal action we took around the COC NOFO. So you'll hear more about that certainly from the secretary and from Megan. But I just want to say how proud I am to be a Californian. I think it is a time where I'm from Ohio originally, as many of you all know. And when I think about friends and colleagues and family across the nation who are not in a state that is taking such incredible action to protect its citizens, I worry for them. So really, really grateful for that. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch quickly on the reorganization of BCSH. As I mentioned to you all last year, the governor's reorganization plan to stand up our new California Housing and Homelessness Agency, as well as our Business Consumer Services Agency. That work is underway. We are actively engaging with stakeholders across the state to make sure we understand what folks expect and need from this reorganization, that it's not just perfunctory, but that it is in fact making our processes easier and resources more accessible in order to build, protect, and provide housing to folks in California. So that work is underway. We are having tribal conversations in the next 2 weeks. So we are really making sure that our tribal leaders are at the table and really making sure we understand what opportunities and challenges folks have experienced accessing state programs and so forth. So just wanted folks to know that that process is underway. The formal split of the two agencies will occur July 1, 2026, but just wanted to provide a quick update as our team is actively working on the implementation of those efforts. And that's all I have.
Well, thank you, Secretary Moss. Yes, on the federal fronts, and not only, of course, with what we most recently experienced with the federal shutdown, and obviously decisions not to support access to things like food support, SNAP, CalFresh. Also, obviously, provisions of HR1, which departments are really focused on. Just a lot of incoming from the federal government that is compromising the progress we've made on a healthy California for all. HR1, we're estimating that over 3.4 million Californians currently receiving healthcare services through Medi-Cal who would otherwise still be eligible, right? Just to make sure I could add that part, could potentially lose access to that care due to the new work and community engagement requirements. We're talking about tens of billions of dollars with the financing provisions that are also included in that legislation, potentially lost to California. Additions there in terms of CalFresh and food access, also with up to a $2 billion shift in funds that are otherwise coming to the state. So we have significant challenges in front of us, and that we have been mitigating through this entire federal administration in these months of 2025. But I am also grateful for California's excellence, innovation, and commitment to mitigating the harm and continuing to uplift our values. One of the things that we have experienced that you all are also likely experiencing is the significance of othering, and particularly immigrant communities, particularly LGBTQIA plus communities, unsheltered populations with this latest conversation, and again, creating a lot of narrative around how people are different. In California, I'm grateful that we celebrate our diversity. It is a gift in which helps us to go further and be the first in the nation in so many places in terms of how we're integrating services and disrupting poverty and more across the state. So again, a lot happening for California Health and Human Services Agency. There's so much that we've actually created a webinar series. So I invite you all where we are bringing different department leaders together to get kind of specifics of a level set, of how the various federal provisions are impacting Californians and what we are doing in response to those new policies and funding reductions. So visit our website, we can make sure that that's available to all. So this latest Secretary Moss reference, federal action related to the continuums of care, where in California, we're talking about $683 million in federal funding from HUD is compromised in terms of the shift from permanent supportive housing to a significant reduction that I know the teams are going to talk a little bit more about. As we have done such a good job, more work to be done, but we've done such a good job on integration. We can't think about this policy proposal in isolation of itself and who it impacts, because we have blended and braided and leveraged funding to provide on-ramps to more permanent housing and continuation and continuity for individuals to achieve stability through that integration. So we have tied and braided these initiatives together, a lot happening between housing and behavioral health, for example, of our interventions. So we are grateful, and as I've been going around the state, I say, please hire an attorney if you know one. Particularly, I'm grateful for Attorney General Bonta, who did, in this case, work with a coalition of 19 other attorneys general and 2 governors to bring the suit to the Trump administration over this funding. So we have that pending litigation. And again, for CalHHS, we have many partnerships with the AG on the same front, because we will say when things are not lawful. And we will bring in those coalitions, and we will really challenge that premise as we're seeing such really bold decisions being made by this administration. So just again, grateful for the partnership on all fronts, and how we again think through holistically how this impacts people as opposed to each funding stream in and of itself. Also wanted to recognize the Cal ICH team for their work on the guidance of recovery housing, which is part of the materials, a tool we want to be available to support individuals in their own journey of recovery. And again, this is the intersection with the great work Director Boss is leading at Healthcare Services and Behavioral Health Transformation. So just really, again, noting that we are continuing in California to lead with a real person-centered approach to integrated services in the benefit of how we do our work. And I just, again, want to lift up the narrative because I know in our action plan, we talked a lot about communications. And I think it's even more necessary, and also want to offer up the phenomenal behavioral health resources that I think all of us benefit from and the work that we've been doing on the continuum, because this is part of our ability to have a different way of expressing both how people are belonging, how we are supporting them to thrive, but also, again, how we're supporting each other through this particular moment. So just tremendous appreciation for everyone's partnership around the table and out there online as well.
Great. Thank you, secretaries. All right, I'll turn it over to our executive officer, Megan Marshall.
Thank you, Giselle, and thank you, co-chairs. We're going to do this just a little bit differently, recognizing the technical difficulties. So I'll say seated for all of our talking portions. We're going to try to keep our distance from the laptop that has a hot mic that's connected to the speakers here. So folks online are hearing some chatter. Our apologies. We will beg, borrow, and do what we need to do to get back in the Allen B building where all is well and all the kinks worked out. So good afternoon, Council. I'm Megan Marshall, the Executive Officer for the California Interagency Council on Homelessness. Want to offer just a few updates for you all today. Some, reiterations or re-emphasizing points made by the co-chairs. But the governor launched what is called the SAFE Task Force. It's the State Action for the Facilitation on Encampments. Co-chair Moss did a fantastic job recognizing the leadership and tremendous support from our colleagues in Councilmember Department of Office of Emergency Services. But when you know it, anything on homelessness has to do with all of you sitting around this collective table. So also want to recognize, of course, our sister Department of Housing and Community Development, Department of Healthcare Services, Department of Social Services, Caltrans, of course. This is a state right-of-way project, and you can't be on state right-of-way without our friends at Caltrans. So with that said, we're moving now into, sort of refining the policies and refining operational standards, how we engage collectively as a state body, as individual departments with our partners at the local level where these things are actively happening. Those are the folks who deploy services on behalf of the state of California. They're critical partners, but those state task force cities are the 10 most populous cities in the state of California. The response for each one of those cities looks different depending upon the city. Folks are in Long Beach today. It is not just a Safe Task Force initiative, but also one funded by the Encampment Resolution Fund, administered by HCD. Whereas we have other jurisdictions on the Safe Task Force list who are not in a position to augment their shelter acceptance or their shelter referrals, and so are instead engaging in deep technical assistance with those jurisdictions. So all that to say, we as a council, we as a state, the administration certainly recognizes the nuances and the unique needs of each one of those task force cities. But because this work is now really defining part of the state collective encampment response, state task force updates are going to be becoming a standing item on this council's agenda. So while your department may not have a specific role, an active role, it is not to say that we will not need your help and your thought partnership as we continue to refine our collective response to encampments. But taking that out of sort of centralized and very formalized and under the umbrella of OES, and instead incorporating it into our collective work. So council members, you'll be hearing from me in our briefings that we do in advance of our council meetings. Members of the public will be hearing from us in this forum on updates to the state's overall response to encampments. So, but with that, also want to underscore the growing threat of course we've talked about. Now,
okay, it'll come back up.
okay, I just want to make sure the public can. Lewis is keeping me on our toes. You just
There
great.
you go. You're back up.
All right, perfect. Apologies for
Sorry.
members of the public and Councilmember Lewis
Welcome, counseling.
online if you lost audio or visual there. Didn't miss much. I take pause. So sort of on the same vein, federal uncertainties, our local partners, continuums of care, our cities, our counties are under tremendous duress at this point in time. And so asking them to make ready services, augmenting their shelter acceptance and placements is an incredible lift for many of our partners right now. I think we had Director Roxanne Wilson, who's also our advisory committee co-chair, say in our last council meeting, we're not doing well. And that was sort of a blanket statement for how folks in county government specifically are feeling with all of the uncertainty and all of the pressures. And meeting the demands of the folks who are in their communities who are desperately seeking these services. And so just want to highlight for the council as we all administer, and I say we all, LICH no longer administers grants, but for those of you who do, reporting requirements, additional asks, changes in services, all of that, just as a collective being mindful of the pressures that our local partners are under at this point in time. With that, I'll move from the SAFE Task Force and specifically speak to the Continuum of Care NOFO. Just also want to highlight that of the 44 continuums of care in California, only 11 are nonprofits. The vast majority of our continuums of care are embedded in county government, and so are the same, contractors and stakeholders that most of us regularly engage with. As the co-chairs mentioned, we've joined a multi-state lawsuit. We are participating in weekly, sometimes it feels like daily calls with our partners nationally, understanding sort of their thought processes, how they're pivoting, considering to pivot, and how they're experiencing, or their providers are experiencing rather, engagement from the federal government. We are aware that there was I think it was Pepperdine University hosted HUD and a couple of their senior advisors and targeted specifically faith-based communities to come and hear how they could be direct applicants to the COC dollars. And that's never been done before. And those are not historic partners with an existing funding stream. So they are aggressively courting folks who do not currently receive COC funds. All of that to say, this is an evolving issue. As we're able to, you will get periodic emails from our co-chairs. Were so gracious in participating in a joint release that you all received on behalf of the council. Subsequent email notifying you of the lawsuit. Please let me specifically know if you all or your staff are getting questions or concerns from stakeholders, and we're happy to engage as best as we can at this point. But I do want to name out loud sort of the fiscal cliff, and it is December 31st. This is not something that is like, it's a gray matter. It is a very hard deadline. So we, regardless of the outcome, will most definitely have at least an 8-month gap in funding for our continuums of care. And that's in all project types, not just permanent housing, not just rapid rehousing, that's across COC funded programs. So just wanted to highlight that, particularly for those of you who also have federal programs, as Secretary Johnson said, that are braided along with other supportive services type grants that are administered by the COC. All right, so moving on to and we'll end on a high note, I promise, but there's a couple of just real critical matters that we have to, as a council, discuss. But wanting to say that we're, Cal-ICH is focusing December honoring lives lost for persons experiencing homelessness. So this is a month when work grows a little heavier for us all. As we recognize the shortest days of the year, we also honor the lives of people who have died experiencing homelessness. So Cal ICH's December focus will be centered on bringing public attention to these losses as we build up in anticipation of December 21st, which is National Homeless Persons Remembrance Day. So this year, Cal ICH staff are working to organize support for a program called Joshua House in Sacramento. It receives a whole plethora of funding, but primarily that made available by Department of Healthcare Services. This is California's first hospice facility, one of the first hospice facilities that is dedicated specifically to serving persons experiencing homelessness who are in the end stages of life. And so it's, a place where dignity is restored in the most critical of all of our life spans. And, persons are allowed to leave this world with a sense of belonging and comfort and community. So if your department is interested in joining this effort, whether through volunteer time, we'll have that organized, donations or signal boosting even, please contact me directly. So as always, Cal ICH remains focused on our action plan goals, helping more people leave unsheltered homelessness, moving people into housing, staying housed, avoid entering into homelessness, and increasing the housing supply needed to make that possible. So, the commitment is firm, and it's very clear from California that we will remain focused on these areas, regardless of external factors that we will continue to discuss throughout today's agenda. But so with that, I will answer any questions or any comments from the council before we move on to the next agenda item. Great. All right. So with that, we'll move on to our agenda item, which is advisory committee updates. And we have with us co-chair Alex Visosky from National Alliance to End Homelessness. Director Roxanne Wilson was unable to join us today for all of the reasons that we discussed, sort of what our county partners are experiencing. But with that, Alex, I'll turn it over to you. Test it out.
Thanks so much, Megan. Good afternoon, council members. Alex Visosky with National Alliance to End Homelessness, co-chair of the advisory committee. Appreciate the opportunity to share an update with you all. As Megan mentioned, Roxanne is unable to join us today, but I'm happy to give the update on behalf of both of us. Our most recent meeting was November 5th. Of course, a lot has happened in the homeless policy space since that time, but I think much of what was said in the meeting was very germane to the events of the last couple of weeks and said in anticipation of some of those events. Want to deeply appreciate Secretaries Moss and Johnson's comments about the federal context here and just the gravity of the moment. And appreciate Director Marshall, your comments on this front as well, acknowledging the conditions that both grantees and people on the ground are facing and are going to be facing. In our meeting, we received an update from Deputy Secretaries Kaplan and Wickrama on the recent federal policy changes and how those policy changes would be expected to impact California. You all are, of course, well aware of the extremely sobering numbers on both the Medi-Cal side, where we're expecting more than 3 million of our fellow Californians to lose coverage. But we're now, since the last advisory committee meeting, a little more in the light about the coming impacts on homelessness with the release of the Continuum of Care NOFA, which included significant changes from previous NOFAs, right? A cap on how much funding can go to permanent housing at 30% of an eligible jurisdiction's award, as well as a major change in how much NOFA funding can go towards what are called Tier 1 projects, which are normally renewals of existing projects. In previous NOFAs, Tier 1 funding has looked about 90% of NOFA funding. In this NOFA, it's only about 30%. We also saw the addition of lots of new language that allows HUD to reject projects, including renewal projects, if they have previously or currently engaged in quote unquote racial preferences, activities that violate the quote unquote sex binary in humans, or engage in activities under the pretext of quote unquote harm reduction. The new NOFA also elevates anti-camping laws, necessitating COCs demonstrate local implementation of anti-camping laws, which of course these anti-camping laws run counter to troves of data that tell us that criminalization of homelessness not only fails to solve homelessness, but actively makes it harder to solve. Our analysis at the Alliance, looking at the cap on permanent housing, finds that California stands to lose approximately $410 million in funding for existing permanent housing programs, which translates to about 27,000 people losing their housing. And that comes on top of existing coming losses from the emergency housing voucher funding that's being cut, which is an additional about 15,000 folks at extreme risk of losing their housing. So that's 40,000 formerly homeless Californians at risk of falling back in. And that's before we even talk about the other kind of safety net cuts. And on that note, I think it shouldn't be lost on us that folks experiencing homelessness, they sit at the intersection of all these cuts. Our partners at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities noted that households receiving rental assistance are formerly homeless households. 3 out of 4 of them are on Medicaid. 2 out of 3 receive nutrition assistance. So the folks getting hit by these housing cuts, they're really bearing the brunt of all of our safety net cuts. This had not been released when we had our last AC meeting. Nevertheless, a number of AC members shared that in anticipation, we wanted to hear more from Cal ICH and from the entities at the table about how the state is thinking about responding in this moment. I think AC members understand the state can't do everything that the federal government does, right? And understand that our state budget picture continues to pose major challenges, but there's a lot we can do to prevent federal changes from really undermining a lot of the progress we've seen across California. So I think my fellow committee members will definitely be, I think, heartened by the tone of this conversation. We've got a long ways to go, right? But there's a lot of progress that we need to hold on to. Since the beginning of 2023, we've seen HAP account for over 90,000 people exiting homelessness back into permanent housing. That's real progress. Folks don't want to see that lost. Of course, some of the conversation about responding is about dollars, but it's also about what collaboration looks like. How do we make sure local grantees have the ability to use HAP dollars in the ways they need to keep folks housed? That doesn't mean losing sight of accountability. It may mean starting to think about and talk about accountability a little differently than we have to date. Our hope as the advisory council is that, of course, while there's active litigation from the 22 states that limits some of the ways that we can talk about the COC NOFA, we can hear more about a coordinated response that matches the urgency of this moment, right? It's an all hands on deck moment, and we know you all have a profound appreciation for the gravity of the moment. So in addition to that conversation at our last meeting, we got a great informative update from Courtney about the working group evaluation that's underway. We also got a really fulsome presentation from Giselle about Cal ICH's recovery housing brief. And I think advisory committee members were pleased to see Cal ICH taking a much more active role in that conversation and affirming for folks that many things can be true at once, right? Housing first continues to be the most effective model when it comes to getting people back into housing and keeping them stably housed. And while that's the case, there's clearly still a need out there for access to substance use treatment services and a desire of some folks exiting homelessness to find environments that are supportive of their treatment, supportive of their recovery. But that we don't have to toss out what works on the housing first front to meet those needs. We can in fact support someone's personal journey to recovery within a housing first framework. But I think we saw this guidance as an important first step. More conversation, I think, is needed on how practically to make that work in the field. Also, just want to take a brief moment, commend Vivila for an excellent presentation on the tribal homelessness policy brief and on the unique needs of this community. That brief, I think, provides a really helpful roadmap forward of how the state might continue to provide the resources, the policy, the engagement to support tribal communities. And then I'll just close this update by saying thank you on behalf of everyone on the advisory committee. We recognize that you all are in this moment of great uncertainty, carrying a really tremendous responsibility and working tirelessly And so we're really grateful for that leadership as we look ahead to 2026 and happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Thank you, Alex. Hearing no questions, we'll move on to our next agenda item, an update from our Lived Advisory Board members, our two lead supports, Melanie Robledo and Monique Guerra. This is their last council meeting offering their updates. We'll hear from a new cohort of lead supports at our March meeting. So just want to acknowledge all of the tremendous investments that Monique and Melanie have made in their time as lead supports, and certainly the first lead supports to be agendized for the council. So with that, I will turn it over to Monique and Melanie.
Hello, folks. Can everyone hear me? Can I get like a thumbs up? Okay. All right. Good afternoon, council members. We are here today to read the concerns and questions from several members of the Lived Experience Advisory Board. These are their words, their observations, and their requests for action. We are speaking on behalf of Brenda from San Luis Obispo, Marjorie from Sacramento, and Alex from Fresno. From Brenda in San Luis Obispo, Brenda shared that across her community, something as basic as a protected bus stop is missing. Many bus stops no longer have roofs or covering, leaving people in the cold and rain. She also wants to know why communities are facing barriers in the COC-NOFO process that prevent them from addressing these simple but essential needs. Brenda also raised major concerns around the disparity and inconsistency in warming shelters. Some shelters open only at night, leaving people standing in the rain all day. Others open earlier and allow people inside during storms, but these practices are not consistent. Once people get inside, many warming centers do not provide hot meals or food. She emphasized that people with chronic health conditions, especially diabetes, are at risk and in danger. She knew someone who wasn't allowed to store insulin in a church refrigerator, ultimately leading him to passing away. Her question for the council is, what are counties doing to protect people with serious medical needs? And how are you addressing the gaps in shelter access, food, and basic infrastructure like covered bus stops?
Thank you, Monique. Hi, everyone. Hello, council members. My name is Melanie Robledo, and I will be reading from what Marjorie is sharing in Sacramento. I also just wanted to pause for a moment. I know that when Monique and I looked back at our notes, we just couldn't help but feel some sort of disappointment. The fact that that person, lost their life because they were unable to get the support and the services that they needed in that moment. From Marjorie in Sacramento, Marjorie highlighted the October 28th joint city council meeting on homelessness and behavioral health in Sacramento. It was an all-day collaboration that included elected officials, county supervisors, mayors, and partners from multiple systems. She felt encouraged to see people in positions of power take homelessness seriously and come together across jurisdictions. But she also heard repeated testimony about gaps in resources, accessibility issues, and the lack of coordination. When people are released from incarceration or are trying to access behavioral health services, veterans and individuals leaving jail or prison are often not being connected to the care they need. Marjorie's question to the council is, how are behavioral health, re-entry services, and homelessness response systems being aligned to ensure that people coming out of incarceration, and especially veterans, receive real support instead of falling through the cracks? I also want to note that the response to incarceration to homelessness crisis is urgent and presents an opportunity for California to lead by example. I remind you that over 7 million people cycle in and out of the jail systems each year. About 2 million people are currently incarcerated as of 2024, and 95% of those in our state systems will exit to community at some point. I'll also say that I have seen the impact when county systems are proactive and coordinated, and I want to specifically lift up Los Angeles County's JCOD as a strong model. My question is, how do we replicate, scale, and strengthen this framework across the state so it reaches people consistently, regardless of county or jurisdiction? Monique?
Thank you, Melanie. From Alex in Fresno. Alex reported that Fresno is shutting down 3 to 4 shelters, resulting in the loss of hundreds of beds. Even as the city accelerates criminalization efforts, he described a pattern where unhoused people are arrested, cited, or incarcerated instead of being connected to services. Fresno officials appear encouraged to take punitive action because they believe the state supports these approaches. Despite this simultaneous loss of shelter capacity and upcoming reductions in permanent supportive housing beds, Alex raised significant concerns about fraud and exploitation under CalAIM. People experiencing homelessness are being enrolled into managed care plans without understanding what they are signing, and in some cases, documents have been forged. He describes a recuperative care program in Fresno that abandoned roughly 200 people after taking funds and leaving them without food and support until another provider stepped in. He also highlighted issues within shelters that are CalAIM providers, noting that some have become inappropriately competitive over clients. In some instances, clients were enrolled with another provider without their knowledge, causing confusion and disrupting their access to care. Alex also pointed to a disconnect between state expectations and local behavior. In certain ERF grant processes, the state asks continuums of care to address criminalization in their narratives, but the content of those narratives has no practical effect when cities feel encouraged by the state leadership to quote unquote crack down on homelessness at the same time they are reducing beds and services. Alex's question to the council is, what oversight, regulation, and accountability are being put in place to prevent CalAIM fraud and ensure that recuperative care and shelter services are legitimate? And how will the state address harmful competition over clients and reconcile its messaging with local criminalization practices that undermine housing and health outcomes? Another item on CalAIM that I think our lead was interested in is possibly if there's time or if folks would like to collaborate with us to maybe just come and do a presentation on CalAIM so that we as lead members understand how the program is expected to operate and how it should be. So we were definitely interested in that. Thank you so much. I'll pass it over to Melanie.
The leave comes with several questions today, so bear with me, folks. The lead would like to ask, how are departments actually incorporating the lead's feedback into your work? In future meetings and conversations, we hope that departments can report back on what changes have been made to program policies or expectations for subrecipients as a result of this feedback. We also would like to request a reliable and transparent way to bring these questions forward. If this council meeting is the right place for that, we welcome it. And if not, we ask for your guidance on creating a process where lived expertise can meaningfully influence decision-making, oversight, and program guidance. This actually reminds me of a quote that states that those closest to the problem are the solution, but furthest from the resources and the power to elicit meaningful change. We also ask, how can there be stronger oversight? And how can state departments and Cal ICH work in partnership, not only with the counties and the cities, but with the full ecosystem of homelessness responders to ensure that the lived experience shared today truly translates into change on the ground? This work can't happen in silos. It requires coordination across nonprofits, continuums of care, faith-based organizations, street medicine teams, community health centers, outreach programs, shelters, and the many local providers who fill critical gaps and keep homelessness systems functioning every single day. We hope that our group will return at the next quarterly meeting and hear how these concerns are being reflected in planning, funding decisions, and accountability structures. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie and Monique. Cal ICH staff have these questions. Some of them are very specific to departments, of course, and to programs. And so we'll be following up with individual council members. We will also send a collective email to the council so folks are tracking, and if there's anything that can be offered, even though you are not a direct administrator of a particular program. And then sort of thinking about like process wise, we then, Callie and I have time on the agenda at every monthly lived experience advisory board meeting. I'm happy to be the conduit, but we will always have our lived experience advisory board supports, the two supports who are elected by their fellow lead members, attend these council meetings so that you all can hear from them directly. which is something that Cal ICH ensured our LEAP members, that they would have that direct connection and audience with you all as council members. So with that, I'll take a pause if there are any questions or comments specifically for Melanie and Monique.
I'll just start and just say tremendous appreciation to both of you for your leadership in serving this capacity, but also for bringing these very concrete, specific examples of what people are experiencing on the ground, and very much appreciate that this is a forum where you are bringing that in. There's an accountability component to this discussion. Recognizing that we will have some follow-up and opportunity to give you specific responses to the questions that were raised. I do want to just say, kind of more broadly, Cal ICH is an example, but we are embedding lived experience voice into all we do in terms of program design and policy planning, which means that when you see what Director Boss will share about the Justice Involved Initiative, that is because Justice Involved individuals have identified gaps they experience when they're released. So it absolutely matters, your voice, and we are absolutely here to engage with you to address those challenges that you're bringing forward. So that's our responsibility. As I always say, like, we actually, above the governor, are the people. So you are our boss. And so just really appreciate that this is a forum where you're saying this isn't working here in this community, and gives us an opportunity to follow up. And whether it's a system issue or a direct issue, that accountability can occur. But Director Boss, anything you want to just raise more broadly in some of the things that were raised?
No, I mean, we're happy to do a CalAIM briefing for the Lived Experience Advisory Board and walk through. We're definitely tracking kind of the conversations in Fresno and the situation that occurred there. And then with regard to the CalAIM Justice Involved Initiative that launched last October, and we continue to roll out additional counties through October 2026. CDCR came online in February of 2025. And so really that is kind of from a behavioral health perspective, those linkages to services pre-release to really establish those connections and ensure that individuals before they are released have providers or are set up with services as to ensure that, full recovery and full great transition. So all of that is in the works, not statewide yet, but we're on our way.
So we have online with her hand up, but I also just want to acknowledge Cal ICH's Lived Experience Advisory Board is the only broadly focused lived experience advisory board. So we have a HHS host the Behavioral Health Task Force. DHCS has a whole host of committees and task force that have persons with lived experience embedded within those groups, but they are specifically focused on like a programmatic area. And so just wanted to, for the good of the LEAP supports, recognize that they are broadly focused, although specific to homelessness, but our council member departments have persons with lived experience and expertise in certain areas embedded on those committees as well.
And we also have just a Medi-Cal member advisory committee, which is broad across the entire system, not specific to a particular area.
I was struggling for that. I think there's like 30 of them that DHCS has alone. So appreciate that. Councilmember Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Melanie and Monique. And some of the things that I was going to say, I think either department heads or the secretary has addressed, but I think that your voice is so valuable because some of the things that are just not thought about, right, that have dire consequences for folks trying to navigate these systems, trying to make it are brought to the forefront, I think is really important. And so one of the things I was going to say, again, has been addressed to some extent, but is there a structured way to ensure that the things that are said here, there's some type of feedback loop? I do know that there's lots of other ways that people with lived experience, expertise are already connected to the departments. And so the benefit of the LEAP for Cal ICH, as Megan said, is it crosses over and it really drills down into like practical things that can be addressed that nobody's really thinking about, because usually is very targeted and narrowly focused on whatever policies and practices you all's respective departments are responsible for. So even if you take back the feedback that you get from the Cal ICH LEAP to your respective lived experience bodies our representatives and see if some of the things that we're hearing here track with them and they give you some potential solutions and policy shifts. Like, I hope that we can have some kind of formal mechanism where the folks that take time to come here and present to you all can understand whether or not the information has been taken back and at least considered. And so don't know what that looks like. I think Megan, you spoke to some of that, but I think that we owe it to this body who's meeting monthly, to the representatives that are cycling in and out to show up here and be here to have some type of accountability report back. Not that you'll do what they ask you to do all the time, but at least to know that it's been considered. And obviously, if there's been something done because of it, then that be reported back as well.
I appreciate that. Oh, yeah, Secretary Moss.
Well, I just wanted to, plus up what Councilmember Lewis was saying, because I do think that part of what I'm hearing is that this is a place in which concerns are being brought, but we want to make sure that those concerns are being integrated into conversations that are happening across state government. So to the extent that ICH staff or can facilitate those concerns and sometimes recommendations, frankly, not just what's wrong, but what community and lead participants want to see done about it. I think having that crosswalk would be super helpful. And then being able to come back in these conversations so that we can understand what's happened with that information, I think would be very helpful. And I just wanted to acknowledge our LEAB members. I know that this is your last ICH meeting, but I'm so grateful for your partnership and participation. It is ever since we've sort of agendized this as a standing item on our agenda, it reminds me not just hearing your voice, but how are we then taking what we're hearing and integrated it into our work, which I think is everyone's desire. And it's just a reminder that that's our responsibility to do.
I appreciate that. Just a note for the LEAB. So each one of the council member departments and your respective staff have sort of instructions and a unique link that you can use to submit requests for things to be heard by your department by the LEAB. So most recently we had OES join a LEAB meeting to present receive feedback from the Lived Experience Advisory Board members directly. Prior to that, we heard from CDSS on CalWORKs HSP on feedback to updated policy. So there are opportunities for individual council member departments as you're considering program changes, policies, et cetera, to engage directly with the LEAB and receive that feedback. And part of that commitment to the LEAB on that front is that we will tell the LEAB, there's always a feedback loop there. We will always let them know, based on your feedback, OES has adopted A, B, and C. Based on your feedback, CDSS has incorporated XYZ into HSP. This sort of them being agendized for the council, this is the newer portion of our engagement with LEAB members. But we can certainly incorporate and have, a solidified process for feedback and those engagements that need to happen at the next council meeting. So very much appreciate Monique. Monique's not going too far. Monique, we're very proud to have Monique as a Cal ICH staff person. She was first a Lived Experience Advisory Board member and subsequently a Cal ICH staff person. So she is not going too far. We're very, very happy to have her on the team. And Melanie Robledo is just a gem down in Southern California and is also not hard for us to find. So I very much appreciate you, Melanie, Monique. Thank you both.
Thank you all as well.
Thank you.
Right. With that, we will move on to the next agenda item. And this portion of the agenda is meant to be sort of round robin style council member department updates. So in each one of the council member briefings, we ask for council members to come prepared to share, highlight an investment, an activity, a program, a policy that is embedded within our collective statewide action plan to prevent and end homelessness. With an emphasis on something that is either directly or indirectly impacted by federal changes. So to sort of sum it up a little bit, land the plane a little bit better than what I just described to you all. Want to hear from each one of you on something in our action plan that's been committed to by your department, that you're engaging with your stakeholders, with your grantees on navigating these uncertain times. And so, whether that's directly with community-based organizations, persons with lived experience, as we've just heard, in our education sphere, students, or multiple campuses. So this is just meant to be round robin, informal, 1 minute, per council member, but just to get the collective thinking about opportunities for support from one another, opportunities from support from Cal ISH staff to you all as you were also navigating these changes. I think we get the most, folks tend to stay a little bit longer when everybody's engaged and talking about all the good stuff that everybody's doing. So with that, and I'm looking at you, Rowena, to kick us off for community colleges. Just would love to hear the things that you all are doing in sort of navigating these uncertain times.
Thank you, Megan. Good afternoon, everyone. So what I wanted to share was the impact on our system of the defunding of the Hispanic Serving Institution federal grants and our Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander serving grants, as well as other MSIs. So we've done a survey of our 116 colleges in terms of recipients of these grants. So for Hispanic serving institutions, we've estimated that loss at about 52 million in the next few years. For Anapeese's, about 5 million in terms of that strengthening institution grant loss. And then for MSIs, another 3 million.
Can you tell us what these acronyms are?
Oh, so the HSI is Hispanic Serving Institution. MSI is the overall category of minority serving institutions. And then for Asian American Pacific Islanders, the program is called Anapeese. And there are other populations that are impacted as well in other states. So we've been tracking this because many of the funded programs are providing holistic support for our Latina students, which is our largest growing demographic, and then secondarily, our Asian American Pacific Islander students as well. And what we've been trying to do is utilize the student support block grant. And so gratitude to our legislature for including that in the budget packet. So we are supporting our colleges and giving them guidance so that they can utilize internally in terms of what the needs are to continue mental health services, counseling services. Some of our programs are also providing other basic needs such as housing referral, all of that. And so that is 60 million that we just allocated across the system. So that's a silver lining in relation to ongoing advocacy that we're doing. And then in terms of our major work on housing and affordability, we are still continuing and committed to doing the intersegmental collaborations that are necessary with our not only agency partners, community partners, and then also our higher ed system partners with the CSU as well as the UC.
Thank you so much. Any questions for community colleges? Secretary Sin.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to mostly present on some of the concerns we have around the new NOFO. And how that's going to impact our veteran population, which constitutes about 1.5 million veterans here in California, of whom around 10,000 are estimated to be homeless on any given night. And obviously, we've seen some considerable reductions in homelessness over the last 15 years that have been part of the state, various administrations since that time, in particular the Newsom administration, in partnership with the legislature and investments from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. So we do have concerns about that. But before I do that, I want to start with a lot of our programs, in particular at the beginning of the second Trump administration, as we evaluated what type of funding is impacting veterans directly. Within our own department, for the most part, a lot of our investments are with the general fund. And for that reason, we were somewhat inoculated from some of the larger cuts and concerns that veterans would be experiencing. For our funding, that was our California Veterans Health Initiative, which is $50 million grants, most of which is granted to local communities in rural health, or now Home Keep Plus, and for veterans throughout California. Those were somewhat inoculated, of course, from major federal cuts. However, that has changed with veterans and how they are deeply impacted when it comes to SNAP benefits, and of course, things like Medi-Cal. And now, additionally, looking at how this is going to impact housing funding for our stakeholders, I'd like to share some details of that, but also just say in particular how proud I am of our own veteran services team in our department. Sean Johnson is here with us, one of our top level executives in our department, being able to really cover down on this issue and focus on these challenges and share this with you. So thanks to Sean and his team for doing that.
Teresa, if you could speak up just a little bit more for folks online.
Sure. Well, nothing I just said was that. No, I'm just kidding. It was now it'll be more important. I'm going to read a little bit about this. So the Continuum of Care program, NOFO, introduced federal policy shifts that place California's veterans' permanent supportive housing system at immediate risk. 99 veterans housing and homelessness prevention funded projects that rely on COC grants for operations and supportive services are potentially impacted. The most consequential changes, of course, are reducing the permanent housing funding from roughly 90% to 30%, as we've all heard. This destabilizes long-established housing first PSH programs and introduces systemic financial risk for providers statewide. For example, when we look at hearing from some of our stakeholders throughout California, Veterans Village of San Diego anticipates a $290,000 annual loss, which is jeopardizing case management, security, and building operations for its VHHP-assisted permanent supportive housing sites. Nation's Finest in Northern California has concerns because they serve our most rural communities and are concerned that there will be no permanent supportive housing from housing. Plowshares that serves mostly the Bay Area reports that all 172 COC supported permanent supportive housing units are now at risk with potential destabilization of Home Keep Plus and future PSH pipelines. And then further analysis, we're estimating that about 4,000 veterans statewide could face housing instability or displacement under the new policy environment. System level consequences include COC halting new permanent supportive housing proposals, reduced ability to maintain veteran housing placements, and heightened risk of increased homelessness among medically fragile veterans. Providers also face potential insolvency due to sudden loss of supportive services funding requirements, funding required for compliance with VHHP covenants. And overall, we see this representing a substantial and urgent threat to our service providers, as well as to veterans who have relied on these permanent supportive housing units. And finally, going back to the VHHP program that was enacted in partnership with HPD in about 2015, heavy reliance on permanent supportive housing around housing first models has been emphasized in the last decade, because we know that permanent supportive housing and supportive services within the veteran space works well. So we feel that this is a direct target to not just California housing policy, housing first policy, but also to the housing programs that have been able to reduce veteran homelessness across the nation. And no one has happened more significantly than here in California. So thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Sin. I might be the only bearer of good news today.
You get 2 minutes.
I was like, stand up.
Yeah.
They can hear you. So.
You know, we have long been advocating for some changes to the private activity bond program and therefore the connection to the 4% tax credit program at the federal level. And those changes were included in HR 1 in July. And we implemented those changes in August to affect our round 2, well, incentivize round 2 award recipients in round 3. And as a result of that, we are likely funding 11,000 more housing units this year than we did last year, so bringing us to probably around 29,000 units this year of low-income housing. So, you know, pretty major change for our program and our staff and the high volume that we're doing. You know, and I'll have more details on what those final numbers look like after next week. But, you know, that's a 30% increase. So really great. That one good thing. Or 50%.
Should have ended with
like clear up the at the end. Like, what I'm assuming is pretty good. Comments.
Directory. Stephanie Clendenin with the Department of State Hospitals, and I would have to say that as a department, we have not been directly impacted by any of the federal policies. We are not federally funded. So I would say that we are fortunate with respect to in that regard with the individuals that we serve directly through our department's programs. But having said that, we do recognize that our partners that we rely on to implement some of our programs, mostly our community-based services and our diversion program for individuals that come that are committed to the department as incompetent trial. These are often individuals who are experiencing homelessness and engaged in the criminal justice system. And in 2018, we were funded for a pilot program to implement a diversion program to help exit individuals from the criminal justice system and connect them to permanent supportive housing. So we do recognize that while we are only funding the services and the programs while they're in our 2-year diversion program, that goal of the connection to the permanent supportive housing after our program ends is in jeopardy with respect to the new federal policy. So continuing to monitor with our partners, how that may impact our programs. And then other than that, I think from a department, we're just continue to monitor the executive order on homelessness around, you know, the call quote for individuals into, you know, to move homeless individuals into long-term institutional settings. You know, we are a long-term institutional setting who serves civilly committed population in partnership with our counties. And so continuing to monitor to see what may look like as additional federal policies. Thank you. And while these are, you know, we'll mostly hear from State Department directors, I do want to acknowledge Dr. Margot Kuchel, who of course is with us from UCSF, you know, which is also state adjacent, state embedded. But I you know, sort of as like the beacon of research in the space of housing and homelessness, Dr. Kuchel, I'm wondering if you can offer, I mean, I see consistent releases coming from BHHI, which is fantastic. But I wonder if you can just offer any updates from your perspective.
I mean, I think we're Thanks so much. I think we're really obviously concerned with not only the EO and the NOFO, but just the general change in tenor of conversation. You know, as in, like, we think of ourselves as like the holder of the evidence, and just about everything is moving against the evidence. Like, we know that Housing First has just an absolutely rock solid evidence base, and really, really concerned about just the change in the media, the change in the tenor of conversations of people miscommunicating what Housing First is, sort of intentionally. And then I would say, obviously, as a healthcare institution, as a healthcare provider, really terrified about the Medicaid changes. And I think when I'm looking at all these estimates of the damage from the NOFO, I think we also have to braid into it, what is the meaning when so many folks are gonna be kicked off of Medicaid? And obviously, what can we do as a state to ensure that that doesn't happen, that this administrative burden, which really is this gain, doesn't cause that loss as well. But I guess we're just here to say, really worried about developments in other states of these very large sort of outdoor, far from the community shelters where people are going to be brought, and really want to make sure that we in California are not tempted to replicate those, you know, really moving people out of sight, out of mind, who will not get what they need. Like, there's this rhetoric around, we're going to treat people. That is not how you treat people. And so I guess we're just here to say, worried about pretty much everything, here to support in any way for any departments. If there's any way that you need any research that we could pull or help you and support you in any way, we're here to do that.
Michelle Moss with the Department of Healthcare Services. So I think the secretary mentioned the broader HR1 impacts to the Medicaid program and kind of ditto the comments about the NOFA. I did also want to just provide some kind of positive highlights here. So January 1st, 2026, we launched transitional rent for the behavioral health population of focus. So these are individuals with behavioral health needs who are homeless or experiencing homeless, transitioning out of whether it's long-term care, institutionalization, carceral setting. And so very excited about that launch this January, moving forward full steam ahead, you know, regardless of what the feds are saying here. And so very excited about that, actively working with our Medi-Cal managed care plans. This is a managed care benefit, and our county behavioral health departments really recognizing the importance of transitional rent and then the linkage to the Behavioral Health Services Act housing intervention dollars, which those go live in July of 2026. So very excited, lots of work at the department in this space. And in a similar vein, we have our flexible housing pools, our technical assistance academy. And I think more important than ever, really this kind of blending or braiding, more importantly, of dollars and really eliminating the silos at the local level. We launched kind of an in-person convening at the beginning of November, really to start continuing to build those partnerships and relationships at the local level. So optimistic about where that will take us, as well as we really think about the fierce urgency for collaborating at the local level to maximize dollars. And then 2 weeks ago, we announced our last round of PATH dollars, and these are dollars that were part of the CalAIM waiver, $1.85 billion to really build out our community supports and enhanced care management networks across the state. So this is our last round of awards, $145 million that went out to community-based organizations, counties, providers to really build out ECM and community support. So still continuing with that work. Excited about it.
Director, and I should have mentioned this earlier. The council certainly knows that we don't just wait for quarterly council meetings to communicate and collaborate with one another. These things happen regularly in between. Our lead members mentioned CalAIM and a specific provider in Fresno. When CalISH became aware of that, immediately connected with our council member department of DHCS, who was incredibly responsive, was already aware of the situation, but kept CalISH in the loop so that we were able to, on our end, have those conversations or close those conversations with county partners and community-based organizations. So just wanted to recognize for members of the public, or perhaps folks who this is their first time joining, Cal ICH and its council member departments have these communications on a very regular basis. Director DeMorris.
Hi, Susan DeMorris, California Department of Aging, and we have more of a population focus on older adults and adults with disabilities, family caregivers, and we're charged with leading the governor's master plan for aging. Goal 1 in the master plan for aging is housing for all ages and stages. In the upcoming quarter, we were scheduled part of our action plan. We were really excited to launch a robust, in partnership with Department of Rehabilitation, robust training for the aging and disability networks along with the COCs. We're deferring that in light of what's happening with the NOFA and the COCs. It's we've been told it's not a good time for that TA and assistance, but really bridging aging, disability, and housing is a goal of ours. We've also partnered with Department of Healthcare Services on a home and community-based services gap analysis. And a big part of that is an in-depth analysis of the housing stock and housing needs of older adults. So we're excited to share out a fact sheet developed by Mathematica under final review right now that uplifts some key statistics. About half of California's unhoused population are 50 or older. And the majority of HUD units are the primary resident would be somebody 50 or older. So some facts like that we want to get into the mainstream. And we're also embarking as point in time counts are finalized and documented. We have heard verbally, anecdotally, and in writing and media reports that most communities have seen a slight decrease in their unhoused population, but consistently an increase in the older adult population who are unhoused. And so we will be evaluating and reporting out on that once all of the point in time counts are finalized and public in the public domain.
Director DeMorris, and to just want to name point in time counts are a HUD funded activity. There are no impacts as far as we're aware. Point in time counts that are scheduled for January of 2026 will occur as they have historically. So for that, we're going to skip over our fantastic co-chairs who mostly offered their updates and opening remarks, and instead move to Director Velasquez.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Gustavo Velasquez from Housing and Community Development. So just as Secretary seen, I'm also going to speak on the COC NOFO. We work very closely with our partners at Cal ICH and BCSH to provide to the Attorney General robust data and evidence, as Member Kushel said, strong evidence that points to the repercussions, the effects on the homeless population of the reversal practice to support consistently permanent supportive housing, in addition to submitting a declaration with 17 other states that point to this strong evidence. So it's very important to say we are eager to confront, but we also need to prepare. And prepare means, I think, to collaborate with our partners, our COCs at the local level, to support from the state in any possible way efforts to ameliorate the effect that they could be suffering in benefit of our homeless. And in that vein, you all know the HAP program, the Housing Homeless Assistance and Prevention Program, very flexible funding that supports all 44 continuums of care. And in an effort to, support them in this assault, we are prepared to evaluate any budget amendments. This is just one of many tools that we are evaluating at the moment, but certainly evaluate any budget amendments to shift a greater proportion of their existing HAP funding to permanent housing solutions. And this can be in the form of capital for permanent housing, operating subsidies, including capitalized operating reserves, rapid rehousing, rental subsidies, supportive services for people living in permanent housing, placement and services for individuals in the CARE Act process, landlord incentives, anything from security deposits, holding fees, repairs, landlord relationship management cost, moving expenses. This is all items that are allowable under the HAP program. And again, for our friends and partners in the COCs, we want to make sure that you hear us loud and clear that we are evaluating every way that the state can support you. And this includes proposed changes in their HAP budgets, and we're more than happy and eager to look into that. So it's just one of the ways that, again, we are confronting, but we're also preparing this further collaboration with our friends at the local level.
Director Sertich.
Thank you. Tony Sertich, Executive Director at the California Housing Finance Agency. Like some of the others, we don't get direct federal funding to administer. However, there are several indirect programs, that affect the loans that we provide to housing. And so we're tracking very closely our Section 811 project rental assistance funds, our Section 8 programs, other HUD funding. And we are also working closely with both Tax Credit Allocation Committee, Housing Community Development, to make sure that as we get these results and see how some of these COC NOFO and other things play out, how we can support and make sure that we're all working together to come up with solutions to some of the effects of some of the policies.
Appreciate that. We talked quite a bit about continuums of care, again, the majority of which are embedded in county government, but also want to highlight the who will also most certainly feel the impacts of these things. And those are our development community, landlord community, at lending community, I think in some respects will also feel. And so as we're, continuing to navigate with the support of the Attorney General's office, just hearing from council member departments with those stakeholders that are impacted that perhaps we don't talk about often, raising those and sharing those with Cal ICH would be very helpful as well. Thank you. Sure.
Victor Ron, Chief Deputy with DOR for Kim Rutledge. So, DOR being one of the less common departments that has physical statewide presence across the state, we continue to strengthen our partnerships at the local level with the COCs and homelessness systems there at the service delivery level. With the agreement to reopen the federal government, we've also received our next round of independent living, part of which go to our longstanding transition fund, which supports one-time costs for people with disabilities, including people with disabilities experiencing homelessness, to transition into community-based housing. And then lastly, we'll take this opportunity to, reiterate for all of our colleagues across this body and the system that while DOR doesn't, have direct specific homelessness response programs, recognizing that people with disabilities are greatly disproportionately represented amongst the population of people experiencing homelessness. We remain a thought partner and a consultant to any of your groups anytime that you are developing any new programs or looking at existing initiatives to apply the ADA accessibility, digital physical accessibility, and disability etiquette lens. So stand by to offer that consultation.
It's a great reminder, particularly as we continue to, we're with the SAFE task force and how the state's response to encampments looks and how we're asking our locals to show up and in kind to who we're coming at the table from the state departments, right? So we had the Department of Public Health, we had CalVet, we've had DMV, we've had, all of these statewide services come to resource fairs around the SAFE task force. but, you know, ensuring that counties and cities know who their partners are locally for disabilities and, you know, for rehab initiatives, all of those things is also, so.
Absolutely.
Well,
And
Safe Task Force as well.
no, absolutely. You know, it's always good to remind us that's a standing offer. And as an example, you know, it's easier to design a program or a space accessibly from the beginning rather than figure out after the fact that it's not accessible to all community members.
Right. Thank you. Dr. Troya?
Good afternoon, Jen Troya, the Director of CDFF. In terms of our core housing and homelessness programs and things that are highlighted in the action plan, we did receive this year's funding for several of those programs, and we have at this point gotten out the funding letters for all of those, and so the allocation letters are out to the counties. We're providing technical assistance. They can plan for how they're going to be continuing or relaunching those services. So that is all moving forward, and we are pleased about that. So I can start on a happy note, and maybe I'll end on a happy note too when I get there. But in the middle, what I'll say is
Which, yes, I like
there's a number of safety net programs that are highly impacted by what is happening in the federal government. Chief among them is the SNAP or CalFresh program. We serve 5.5 million Californians through that program with just basic assistance for nutrition to be able to just purchase groceries. Federal shutdown provided enormous disruption to our program. It was sort of one of those that was the most directly impacted in terms of people's benefits actually being delayed and there being tremendous uncertainty and of course the stress of not knowing whether or not you can literally put food on your table and very destabilized. So that incredibly stressful circumstance. It is exacerbated by the fact that at present SNAP benefits or CalFresh benefits are 100% federally funded. So those dollars don't flow through the state. The way that most of our programs have some sort of mix of share of federal and state funds. They are purely federal funds for the benefits. Which brings me to the additional bad news, which is that under HR 1, that is now changing and the state will have a share of those costs potentially. It depends on our error rate in terms of participant and county errors in any over or under issuances of benefits. Even though we are within around the national average of the error rate we presently have, which is around 11%, would give us a $2 billion cost share annually for the CalFresh program as of 2029. So we are clearly working on reducing our error rate and in the long term trying to get to that accuracy, which would allow us to avoid either part or all of that cost share, but it is obviously challenging. There are a number of other restrictions, cuts, eligibility changes within HR 1. The total is at least $2 to $4 billion in either shifts or cuts, and hundreds of thousands of people who we anticipate being dropped from the caseload and losing access to that incredibly important piece. So this obviously has domino effects. Like what we know from the research is, of course, that providing these concrete supports leads to greater stability, less child welfare involvement, less homelessness, all of the things that we are working toward. The research also very clearly shows the opposite, that the removal of those concrete supports leads to increases in child welfare involvement, increases in homelessness, increases in poverty. So we are clearly doing everything that we can to mitigate those losses of benefits, but the law is designed to result in very significant losses of benefits, and even our best efforts to mitigate harm are unlikely to do so for everyone who could potentially be impacted. So we are both trying to do that mitigation of the harm, but also prepare for potential impacts that ripple effects that we expect. We also run a number of immigration-related support programs, legal support, supports for our immigrant Californians. HR 1 increased the funding for ICE by 13 times what they had received before, and I don't think I have to tell any of you what's in the headlines in terms of what has been happening for immigrant communities across the nation and here in California. So we've stood up some hubs that are helping in particular with new funding to allow for greater coordination of all of the various systems of care and partners in addition to the immigrant serving specific organizations, and that has been I think, successful so far and an important resource, but something we're continuing to build as a the happy note I'll end with is our team is right now at the CalWorks Training Academy, lifting up and celebrating that we are making some really major reforms in California to our CalWorks or TANF program that are very family friendly and very centered on the holistic nature of meeting families' needs and moving away from a compliance oriented program and into one that is more centered on families. So for purposes of this discussion, I would say that it is families with children will experience homelessness less often, not only because of the direct homelessness programs within CalWorks, but because we are reforming the overall program in ways that better families. That's the bright note I'll end on.
Thank you, Director Troy. A quick question on the funding breakdown. So you mentioned that SNAP is 100%, CalWorks is 100% federally funded. As far as
not, but yeah,
that's what, okay. That's just thank you for the clarification.
And it's we do have a share of the costs and of some of the other ancillary programs. So there are still significant state costs. That cost share is also going up under HR1, our portion of the administration costs. But the benefits themselves are over $1 billion a month, and that right now is purely federally funded under HR1. That's what shifts to.
I'm so sorry. If you wouldn't mind reintroducing yourself. Yeah, you're here representing Director Kind Pereira from Workforce Development Board.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. Pleasure to see many familiar faces and of course meet some new ones. I'm Michael Wiafe, Assistant Deputy Director of Workforce Policy and External California Workforce Development Board. Some folks know me from my previous role in the governor's office. I was Assistant Deputy Cabinet Secretary and was working on issues of education. I have the difficulty of choosing whether to start or end. You all gave me that difficult task. I'm going to decide to start unhappy and end happy, and join into the chorus of federal challenges, bless you, and uncertainty that we're facing as well. WIOA, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, which very much so is the foundation for how workforce works across the country, is basically up in the air with HR1. And so we're kind of in the space of figuring out what opportunities may exist and how to engage in very critical conversations like a workforce requirement for Medicaid, while at the same time not knowing if a large chunk of our organization is going to be funded in the future. And so there's a lot of, I think, challenging conversations that, of course, we're engaging in, but not leaving all the opportunities off the table during that time. So now I get to hopefully some opportunity and happiness. I think most relevant probably to the discussions here with this group and came up earlier from our lived experience colleagues is actually just in a couple of months. Hopefully by the next time we meet, the RFA will be out for Helping Justice Involved in Reenter Employment Program, which just got $10 million during a very difficult budget year this year. And so some dollars will be going out, and really what this is to help support folks who are working to help place folks in jobs and help get them training as well. Once they re-enter into the population, mix that in with supportive services as well. And so there is work that is happening, and we should be hearing a little bit more about that and exactly how they'll be rolling out in the next couple of months. So we are very excited about that, and that work, luckily, I think continues to have energy, both on the state side, and my understanding as I'm learning in my new role from the federal side as well. We're continuing collaboration with Caltrans as well around high road construction, where we have the opportunity to use strategizing on how to prioritize, again, the reentry population, as well as those who are experiencing homelessness or have experienced homelessness and other priority populations. The reality is for the majority of folks who try to find workforce training, it's not going to be the folks who have had a ton of opportunity. It's typically folks who are looking for the opportunity. And so how do we make sure that we're prioritizing that while at the same time staying open to everyone and ensuring that we're tailoring programs towards those populations is very much so core to our discussion. A lot of what we've been actually doing as Kind Pereira, our executive director, continues and now going into year 2 in his role, is visiting a lot of the local regions and local workforce. There are 45 of them, each one very different. some operating, I'd say closer to the more baseline level of a American Job Center or American Job Center. And others are very much so central to the entire discussion in their community. And so what we're doing is having the open-ended conversation of what's going right, what are the challenges, where can we help? As you all know, this is an opportunity to reposition ourselves in the conversation. Now, this includes things as interesting as fisheries in the Humboldt County area and how some of the things that they're experiencing are impacting fisheries and our ability to eat sushi for dinner, for example, or have affordable fish across the state and in many parts of the country. But it also goes to water issues in the Central Valley and how if water does not flow the way that we hope that it'll flow, that they may experience high levels of unemployment and how that might impact the industry there and of course then workforce there. Of course, as came up earlier as well, immigration in LA and how that's impacting a lot of folks who maybe are choosing not to go to work or maybe choosing not to partake in a training that may have provided them access to work. And so having so many conversations there and of course leaning into and engaging around jobs first, as many of you know, I still carry that flag very high, the master plan for career education, and making sure that we are coordinating both regions and state. Constant flow of information is what we find to be extremely critical during this time of uncertainty, where being able to know what's happening on the ground quickly and being able to relay that to the state and state be able to relay information back to regions is more important. So pleasure to be here and thank you for the warm welcome so far.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Michael? Thank you for that report out. So it's unclear whether or not the workforce investment boards will get resources from the feds and therefore, so is that not in HR 1 and it's still being contemplated or what's happening?
Yeah, good question. I'm still learning myself, so bear with me here. My understanding is that local boards still have a degree of certainty around resources. It's the state boards that don't.
Oh, I see.
And so we don't actually have kind of control of their dollars. The dollars flow directly from the federal government
To the locals.
boards, but we do get a percentage of that then helps with our baseline operation.
I see. So if we were to have to implement these work requirements, which are conceivable, that would be a partnership that we would want to have, right, with the local boards. And yet it's unclear whether or not that will actually connect in terms of resources and strategy for programs.
Lots is up in the air.
Yeah.
And every time it comes up, folks are like, we'll find out.
Yeah.
We're all looking at the same time. So.
Thank you.
Also want to acknowledge she's no longer online with us, but Melanie has shared this publicly in many spaces. But Caltrans was the partnership that you have with Caltrans. That was her first employment opportunity after she re-entered. So, you know, dear to our council for sure. Thank you.
Hi, Ricky Hammett, here on Director Ward. So first, we've been working on incorporating Housing First through all of our ongoing programs that are part of the program updates and programs that have housing assistance shelter programs. They've been required. However, we're actually doing all the specific language each funding opportunity so that just an understanding that that's required for each of the programs. And then also we're looking at incorporating some of the questions around homelessness into our progress report. So we'll get better data on services provided to the individuals that our programs work with. What we don't track in the way on those experiencing homelessness right now. Some of the programs, partly because this population can be transient when they're receiving services. So you may only be in shelter for a certain amount of time and we don't track necessarily, or the programs don't track where individuals go after. But we're going to look at adding some questions from that strategic investment report spreadsheet so that we can get more information because some of the projects do collect that information.
I could just really quickly, because there were some council members who are wondering, well, how does OES not input into HMIS or require their grantees center into HMIS? It is the target population. So mostly these are persons experiencing domestic violence or survivors of domestic violence.
or youth escaping some sort of emergency situation. So all that to say, those are populations that are prohibited federally from being entered into HMIS, but work is underway to develop parallel similar systems to HMIS, but specific to those populations. Just wanted to clarify.
Yes, so a lot of the organizations that do receive funding are from the victim service programs are community-based organizations, and we understand challenges happening at the federal level. So we've been working closely with our legal department and the Attorney General's office on our federal funding that we receive, specifically for these programs. We receive some state funding, but they also receive Victims of Crime Act and on Violence Against Women Act funding. And so there's been some legal challenges, and we have been successful in the courts where certain immigration conditions were placed on the funding, and that not being able to provide legal services to aliens. And so those terms being successful in the courts is that it doesn't apply to these programs. The terms regarding immigration enforcement and providing legal service for aliens not based on immigration status. So that's positive news there. We are also, this isn't related to these programs necessarily, but today they're at Cal OES, where the local Office of Emergency Service departments came together, and there's been cuts to our Homeland Security and management funding. Terms have been placed on those programs. We've been successful in some of the litigation, but some of them are still pending. And so those local governments have to determine like where they might have to potentially cut to their programs as well. So that like impacts everybody. And then so some of the things that we've been trying to help these programs specifically is that we're going to get supplemental funding for the Victims of Crime Act funding that had been reduced for the last few years. And so being able to give them state funding that they can be spending while some of this litigation was in the courts wouldn't be delaying services or requests for reimbursements. Now that the federal government has opened up, the reimbursement request should start to move again. We are also there's a guide that's available for a disaster guide for those experiencing homelessness. That's available from our department.
And that was the thing that the LEAD most recently, I think, commented on. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I know the LEADSOS team is also exploring creating maps on data on social vulnerabilities and disaster risks. So that's something that we can do later. And I think that is all that I had, except for one other big news is that Director Ward is retiring at the end of this month. Be a big loss for us. We don't know yet who is the director or the acting director at this point.
Thank you, Ricky, and thank you, council members. Any questions one another before we move on in our agenda? You can see. All right, we'll move on to standing business. So this first portion of standing business is just a very brief update around our quarterly data update. As a reminder, we provide quarterly data reporting in your council briefing materials, and those materials are included again for transparency and thought partnership coordination. But the data contained in this quarter's report is mostly unchanged from our last council meeting, so we will not be presenting those numbers and going through the full walkthrough again. But we'll some variances in the March report. So we'll definitely resume. I just wanted to highlight those are in your briefing packets. You will have access to those if you need to reference them for whatever reason. But if you know, so as it relates to our action plan, we have
had for the prevention of more persons from becoming homeless. We have a few data sharing agreements, but for purposes of the conversation, our largest data sharing agreement is with Cal HHS. It includes departments within Cal HHS. We've been working and will continue to work with our partners at DHCS, at CDSS, to do data matching from the Homeless Data Integration System, HDIS, which is our statewide collection of data from all 44 continuums of care. But this is a 3-year action plan. We're about a year in. We're still refining and working on the matching methodology with those respective data teams, and are at a point now where we need to pivot the methodology and sort of the target population for full development of the prevention goal. And so I'll pick on poor Secretary McCumber, who apparently overheated and stuck on Highway 99. But another data sharing agreement we have is with CDCR. There's been a lot of conversation today around justice involved population, reentry population. And so Cal HHS is data research team will work with CDCR. That's an immediate opportunity for us to pivot the methodology for goal 4. The goal itself is what the council voted on. The goal itself will remain the same, which is preventing more persons from entering into homelessness. It is just the baseline sort of target population that might shift. And so this will not be something that we'll vote on or need to vote on in the March meeting, as the goal is changed. But we will have more information to share, hopefully happy information to share at the March meeting. But also just want to reiterate, doesn't stop our work in very exciting work with Cal HHS, CDSS, DHCS in doing that important matching. Although I will say it took LA County, I think, 20 years to make good on their data sharing agreement of a similar magnitude. And so we're making pretty good progress as a state. So
Not gonna take us 20.
it's not gonna take us 20. It's gonna take us 20 years. I think the agreement itself was like 12 months, which, with God bless our attorneys. Yes, we love them, but that takes time. So, but very impressive. That's coming from local government to see the state move in this. So, more to come on that, but just wanted to offer that update as far as our goal 4 is concerned. So, more to share in March. So with that, Insanity Business is the umbrella of Housing First. We're going to move into a presentation by Giselle Sanchez around our recovery housing guidance. So again, in one of the many emails you all have received from me in the last few months was the announcement that our recovery housing guidance document was public. We have shared this. We've been on sort of a roadshow of sorts, ensuring that we're sharing this information with concerned stakeholders. We've also had probably the most interest from local elected bodies on this guidance than anything else that Cal ICH has produced. We've been providing those technical assistance connections and opportunities. So Giselle will give some details, but just wanted to hit the highlight here, which is it has always been the case that state dollars could be used for recovery housing. The caveat is so long as that recovery housing program abides by the core components of Housing First. We acknowledge that's challenging, and it really requires a skilled provider who is incredibly adept at case management and all of those things. But it is not impossible. There are, in fact, many communities in California who've been doing this for a while. I'll highlight a former county of mine, Placer. Placer County's had a recovery housing program that's incorporated a multitude of state funding for at least the last 10 years. So it's challenging, but it absolutely can be done. This recovery housing guidance was meant to sort of state that more broadly, and offer Cal ICH as a resource for those communities who need recovery housing in their continuum of homeless response. So with that, I will turn it over to Giselle. Thank you, Megan. For those who don't know me, I am Giselle Sanchez. I am currently acting as the Council Coordination Manager. However, in my usual position, I am the Homelessness Policy Specialist, which means I support the team around all things surrounding homelessness policy, most importantly, our Housing First policies. So before we get into recovery housing, I will talk a little bit about Housing First. To start, Housing First is an evidence strategy for addressing homelessness, where housing is the foundation for health, recovery, and overall well-being. Most people are familiar with the concept of Housing First. Historically, it began as a means to lower barriers for people who were unable to access housing, such as those with disabilities or chronic health issues, people experiencing chronic homelessness. And this model allowed them to get some stability in housing to then address some of their other goals. It was also different from other strategies that required people to be sober before entering housing or while in housing, which if that didn't align with a person's needs, you could prolong homelessness. Housing First also includes person-centered services. So there's the ability to choose services that meet participants' needs. And Housing First also includes preventing returns to homelessness whenever possible, by not removing people solely for the use of drugs or alcohol, and instead connecting people to more appropriate services when needed. Housing First is not housing only. Although participants are not required to accept services offered to them, providers should be continuing to engage participants to understand their needs, goals, and the types of services that they would like. So California has a Housing First law. In 2016, SB established a definition of Housing First and its 11 core components for the state. It also created this council to oversee the implementation of the Housing First law. The 11 core components are summarized here. In our work to oversee Housing First, we enforce that these core components are adopted by state programs addressing and preventing homelessness, including recovery housing programs. This includes assessing program guidelines and NOFAs and providing departments with resources, recommendations, and guidance for any challenges that they may have. I won't go over all of these, but I will highlight a few that are important to recovery housing. Core component number 5, there is no requirement to participate in services in order to receive or retain housing. This means that participation must be voluntary, and in order for services to be truly voluntary, there must be a variety of services available in the community. The person should be informed about them so they can choose which one they want to participate in. Core component number 7, no eviction solely for the use of drugs or alcohol without any other lease violation. This means service providers should use evidence-based techniques and participant-centered approaches to prevent participants from engaging in actions that may lead to further violation of program requirements. And core component number 10, services use harm reduction philosophy to engage with participants. So this means that providers must be supporting participants in their recovery without judgment, and if necessary, engage with participants to choose other housing settings or recovery candidates if their needs. California's Housing First law and recovery housing program are not at odds. They share a common goal to help sustain recovery through housing stability and supportive care. CalACH's guidance shows how to do both of these together. To explain what recovery housing is, they are sober living facilities and programs that provide housing in a recovery-focused and peer-supported community for people recovering from substance use issues. And there's often confusion for how recovery housing and Housing First can work together, because recovery housing requires people to be sober, while Housing First includes not having any requirements to receive or maintain housing services, including sobriety. On the surface, they may seem contradictory. However, a main principle of Housing First is that the participant can choose services and have tailored services. So if a person decides they want to be in recovery housing and want to be sober, that option should be available to them. All that being said, solutions to homelessness are not one size fits all. Recovery housing is a necessary part of the homelessness response system, and the system must be equipped for people seeking support for those in the recovery journey.
I also want to recognize that there are some occasions where recovery is not voluntary, such as in cases where it is court ordered. And we work with our state departments to ensure that these programs are also in compliance with the law. So we have just released the recovery housing guidance. This guidance, we want to ensure that the confusion with Housing First and recovery housing are cleared up. And they're in fact not contradictory, but coexist in the services that a person chooses to address their needs. This guidance is now up on our website, as well as the short summary of the guidance. There are 4 key points that we included in this guidance. 1, participant choice. So entry must be voluntary. People must be offered access to other housing options if they decline or exit. Number 2, person-centered care and harm reduction. Recovery housing programs must provide treatment and services that are participant-driven and tailored to participant goals. They must accommodate medication assisted treatment, or MAT, and engage with participants to understand their needs by using motivational interviewing, and peer support. Number 3, there's no eviction for relapse. Relapse must not be the cause for removal of a recovery housing program. Programs must not remove participants due to relapse or substance abuse, and providers are expected to offer relapse support to participants. People should not be exited to homelessness and instead connected to other support options. And number 4, accountability with compassion. Above all, our programs and services should be accountable to tailored to people and the needs of the participants so that they can be successful in reaching their goals. And then lastly, just to highlight some of our best practices that were included in the guidance. On the system level, we are encouraging communities to provide a variety of housing options, including recovery housing, so that a person has actual choice. They are engaged in services. There are people who are looking for sober environments, and the system should be equipped to address these goals. And on the program level, we are encouraging recovery housing programs to have standard policies, especially policies for voluntary participation and person-centered services, so that recovery housing can be implemented in accordance with Housing First. We also recognize that implementing this guidance can be challenging for some communities. It could require changes to policies and procedures, the infrastructure, to the way staff are trained. But CalICH is available to provide assistance. So if there are any questions from state staff or from community members, please feel free to reach out to us. All right, and I'll turn it back to Megan.
Thank you, Giselle. I just want to acknowledge that this guidance is such an awkward setup. This guidance took the better part of a year to develop and was done in collaboration with folks from field experts, research. Our very own council member, Dr. Margaret Michelle, participated in the review. Alex Wazowski, who's and so this was not done in a silo of CalICH's Housing First sort of technical assistance. Any questions on recovery housing? I will say the 2-page sort of quick summary is modeled after what we've received as far as questions or areas of confusion. It reads more like a vignette. It's more of a decision tree. It's if this, then that. Folks are mostly concerned if a person has relapse, creating harm to the environment, damage to the property, damage to the community, all of those things. Can they be removed? The answer is, like any leaseholder in the state of California, there are usually provisions that would then warrant an eviction if certain conditions are met. And so it is not often that a person relapses in heavy use of substances and there is not another accompanying behavior, right? Like it is not the simple use of relapsing and there was no secondary consequence or secondary behavior that would have been covered in the lease. So anyway, so the summary page, the 2-pager reads as a vignette. But what we have found is that providers who are most interested in using state dollars for recovery housing programs have very specific community questions that they'd like to walk through with staff. So again, please let us know if we can help your respective stakeholders in any way.
Megan, I wondered, you all have done sort of webinars and other tools for other rollouts you've done, the HARP program, et cetera, and given the sort of high interest in this guidance, I wonder if that would be helpful to have something evergreen that speaks specifically to this sort of summary list of things that people keep asking about.
Yes, that was December, but then a situation happened upon all of the communities that we would have asked to participate in said webinar. We had a few county folks lined up who we were going to participate and highlight their implementation of recovery housing first using factors and how they are making it. But again, folks became quickly unavailable. So yes, that is it's in the queue of things for CalISH to develop and have posted on our website to be evergreen.
Another question. This is Susan DeMorris, California Department of Aging. I really like maybe 3 slides back where it talks about the client will have options and alternatives. And it's not clear who provides those because there's not always a, let's see, people must be offered access to other housing options if they decline or exit. Would that be the recovery center that's required to find those alternatives, or they refer them back to
that's another really that's
a health plan or the continuum of care?
The first ask from folks in our technical assistance offerings has been more or less how can somebody be evicted under these conditions? The second is who's responsible for what? And what we have found, and certainly was my experience in 3 county governments, these community of providers are not necessarily familiar with one another. And so the expectation that was established in HAP, and I think this was in most certainly in the most recent versions of HAP, require regional planning and regional coordination. And we specified, like, you must have your recovery community, your victim service providers, they must be part of your regional planning for homelessness initiatives. And so that sort of was forcing conversations to happen locally that historically haven't been happening. But the expectation is that if I'm a recovery health provider and somebody must be removed, I know who my continuum of care is, who is sort of that front face for our shelter system, and I am making that connection. It may not result in an immediate placement, but I as the recovery housing program provider am responsible for making that connection. It is a simple matter of knowing who your colleagues are across those systems of care.
Or if there isn't an alternative, or there's a wait list, and I'm just curious. I support that exits to homelessness must be extremely rare, but I'm just not sure, like you said, who's responsible to see the person all the way through if that's not the right setting.
And in practice, it's almost impossible because it is dependent on person choice. Meaning that, if I'm being told I have violated my lease and I'm going to be evicted from this unit, I am likely not really going to hear what comes after that, but I have an emergency shelter bed for you, or I'm going to connect you to an emergency shelter, or a motel voucher. Likely I'm so infuriated that I am being removed from a permanent housing setting from this recovery community. I'm likely to decline. And this is why, like, having skilled case managers and a skilled provider and having those connections established before somebody is being removed are so critical to success.
I wonder if any communities have tried, in Santa Clara County, when they targeted people for PSH who are very, very impaired, they held 2 units open. once people were sort of on the verge of removal, if they were decompensating, if they had trouble, they moved them to those units, stabilize them, and then figured out the next placement. I do think that recovery housing is such a clearly important part of the continuum. And also want to acknowledge that this is the hardest part of it. And I'm wondering if any of the bigger counties particularly, they have tried that because, you know, as someone who does a lot of addiction care, like relapse is part of the journey. It's absolutely expected. And so if you can expect things, can you build for it? And I'm wondering, Megan, if anyone has tried that or used that where they bring someone in crisis into a sort of a third space. You might have to have some empty space, so that's not perfect, but move them into a third space. Then if they, or you know, if they're stabilized, either move back to recovery housing, or if they're clearly not, can they then be prioritized to some other SH?
I can offer LA County as a quick example. They have, of course, one of the largest flexible housing subsidy pools in the state. And they do exactly that. It is, and their, their model has been whatever it takes for, the last 10 years at least. Part of whatever it takes is, whatever it takes now and in the future. Now you are decompensating in this permanent housing environment, this sober living environment. Are you willing to, recommit yourself to sobriety, recommit to treatment? If that's the case, then that's one arm of services. And if that is not the case, we need to find alternative housing options for you, even if that's an emergency shelter. But they do have built into their lease, they will hold units for a specific period of time if that individual is willing to accept alternative placement, even for a short period. So, I mean, it's something that they build into their program lease. And LA's scale of units and available quite large, but for counties like Nevada, right, where there's 16 beds, I think was the last count, that it might not be reasonable, but also demand perhaps is a little bit less. So I think that's community by community, depending upon the stock that they have. Any questions about recovery housing?
Yeah, Veronica.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Lewis.
Hi, thanks for this. I know there's been a mixed response. I think it's really important that a menu of options for people on at different parts of their journey is critically important. And from somebody who has done everything on the spectrum of substance use support for people who are using drugs or substances, including abstinence models, right? Recovery housing, including actual treatment, and one of the loudest voices for harm reduction, right? So talking about every point on the journey, I think it's critically important to create opportunities for people to relapse and have housing that allows for that. Like a lot of the recovery bridge housing programs are abstinence based. And so there's just a few, I think, in the state that are actually harm reduction based, and having a place designated for people to land is critical. And to the point that you made, I appreciate the question that was just asked. There's only a few places in California that I'm aware of that whose unit holding policies include people that are maybe accessing recovery or going to other places that are more appropriate if they have higher behavioral health needs, and allowing them to come back, because most of the permanent housing hold unit policies are related to institutionalization, whether that's, a certain number of days where somebody's incarcerated or possibly in hospital care. And so I think that one of the things that can be explored to expand making eviction extremely rare is looking at the policies associated with some of the financing and some of the subsidies related to these permanent housing sites that allows for behavioral health type needs as an allowable reason to hold the unit for folks. There's a whole other conversation around obviously the funding contraction we're in and the unfortunate reduced availability of a lot of the temporary housing types we're talking about. But there are some policy implications for really trying to create a housing first system. And it's not just from HCD. There's a few different departments that are represented on this council that can look, including again the financing leg, that can look at their policies and possibly support this further, even though we're in this strange funding environment.
Final thoughts on recovery housing. We'll continue, as we have said, make ourselves available if there are opportunities for us to engage with your unique set of stakeholders. We're happy to do it. And we will, to Secretary Moss's point, as soon as counties have a little bit more breathing room, put together a webinar that folks can access on a permanent basis. That I will wrap up our standing business with an update on AB 799. And this is applicable to just a subset of our council member departments, so we will not spend too much time here. But just as a reminder, AB 799 is what we call companion legislation to AB 977. Requires state dollar investments in housing and homelessness to be entered into HMIS, which then of course rolls up into HEIS. 799 requires for Cal ICH to get from its 977 impacted departments outcome and fiscal data in submission beginning February 1 of 2027, with things publicly available on or before June 1st of 2027. The council member departments who are implicated or impacted under 799 received in their briefing a whole walkthrough of a memo. We'll have additional follow-up. But just for the good of the council, we are working on yet another dashboard that will be publicly available to sort of complement the data that is being gathered in HMIS. So really quick timeline, we're in the current stage where we've provided council member departments with the memo. We'll hold consultations from now until the end of January. I just want to fast forward to, again, that final stage is we'll have a publicly available dashboard June 1st of 2027, but multiple opportunities of engagement with those departments who are required to participate in 799 between those two bookends. But as many of you know, Cal ICH had an audit in 2024. The state auditor's office has expressed tremendous interest in our progress on AB 799. So this will be something that we continue to share and discuss in council as well. Questions on 799 before we move to the final item on our agenda? Director Troya, your staff said they are very excited about AB 799, so we were very pleased with the enthusiasm from CDSS. So our final item here on the agenda is just an update on where we are as far as our working group progress is. Council members received an email several months ago at this point, alerting them to an immediate pause on all of Cal ICH's working groups. That pause will continue, but wanted to provide sort of an update on what's happened between our last meeting and now, as well as sort of a reminder on working groups and what is required of Cal ICH. So in statute, the language is that the council may establish working groups, task forces, or other structures from within its membership or with outside members to assist in its work. So the considerations that we staff have established are, establishing a defined issue or deliverable through the council or through authority as executive officer, establishing a timeline for those expected deliverables, and then dissolving the working group once those objectives are achieved. So where we are now, all working groups have been paused and will continue to be paused since August of 2025. What we found, the crux of this really was that working groups were operating more like public bodies than working groups focused on specific deliverables. And so needed to take that pause to ensure that whatever work is being asked of these incredible experts and very passionate folks around specific issues, that we are making it very clear what must be public and what can't be internally within my authority as executive officer. We met with all of the working groups that had been established, and in some cases met multiple times with individual members to hear their concerns. There was a lot of feelings around the work that had been done to date within each one of the working groups, and how would Cal ICH continue that work or continue to move forward in those certain areas. And so I think that was a time tremendously well spent. Councilmember Lewis graciously gave me additional time outside of the work of the council to think about the questions and sort of the feedback. She was also a working group member, so like as I said, tremendous benefit in hearing from each one of the working groups. Where we're going is there two sort of pathways here. First, and as a reminder, Secretary Moss mentioned this in her opening comments, but from July 1, 2026, we'll have a new agency. She mentioned some of the changes in that new agency. One is that Cal ICH will be established as an independent business unit, as a department. And so really wanting to, between now and July, standardize, formalize all of our processes so that we are incredibly clear for the sake of our public engagements, what's what within Cal ICH and our respective work. The one path is you all as a council can establish through a vote a working group that is still dependent on our Cal ICH staff resources. And it is those entities would be subject to Bagley Keene and would have to be available and open to the public. So under the council's authority, those working groups, bodies will be charged with advising or informing the council on a specific action area. And then through the executive officer established working groups, I'll give a quick summation here. Those are non-public bodies and would be, established only if there was a gap in staffing expertise, internal knowledge, all of those things, but would also need to be, dependent on available resources. And again, formed only when a clear gap or unmet need exists. So with that, we will continue to pause. There are, I'll speak to the racial equity working group as well as the youth and young adult working group. There are other state entities that are working and focusing on certain aspects that were also being discussed and sort of worked through in those working groups. Cal ICH has also joined a multi-state work to address youth homelessness. We're joined by, wouldn't you know it, many of the states who are also on the multi-state lawsuit for the COC NOFO. But we are also working more collaboratively with our Youth Empowerment Commission, who has identified youth homelessness as one of their top 5 priorities. But we'll continue to engage with those very passionate folks who were on our youth and young adult working group as those opportunities to exist within Cal ICH. All that to say, any questions about the process of the working groups and where we are at present?
Maybe just a question for clarification. One, I just want to fully appreciate all of the participants of the working groups and just acknowledge and appreciate their time in trying to be partners with us, that I hope they still feel like they are partners with us in realizing our action plan. The clarifying question I have is related to the executive officer established, which based on how this reads to me, is not necessarily a working group of the council. Is that fair? Because especially as it relates to governance and open, it sounds like it's more of this body has the council established. Your position in the team sounds like that would be augmenting capacity for other things that you've identified. Maybe would or wouldn't come to the council for updates, et cetera.
And I genuinely mean this when I say all of the work that we do as staff, we, make available and hope benefits the council, whether or not the council has voted on something or requested or required staff to work on something. HEART is a good example. The Recovery Housing Guidance is a good example. That wasn't at the request of council. It is something, though, that we've continued to incorporate in all of our agendas as updates have been available. The same would be true for any. Okay. Any other questions? Right. Pass it to Giselle to facilitate comments. We're coming to the close of our agenda. All station.
All right, this is our other final agenda item. We will now accept general public comment. Thank you for your patience, and we appreciate the for listening. Well, we welcome all comments and feedback. I'd like to remind everybody that we are unable to discuss items that are not on the agenda for today's meeting. Additionally, due to the structure of this public meeting, we will not be able to respond to any questions. If you have questions for CalICH or the council, we ask that you please email us at calich@bch.ca.gov. Everybody will get 2 minutes for their comment. A CalICH staff member will soon share a screen with a 2-minute countdown timer, and we will warn you when your time has expired. If you're connected through Zoom, select the raised hand icon in the meeting window of your computer and you comment. For those joining us by telephone, you may press *9 to indicate you'd like to comment. And once I call on you, and for those joining us in person, please raise your hand if you have a public comment. All right, I see no hands raised in person. We do have a few members of the line. We have 2 hands raised. Desiree Martinez. A second, or give us a second, sir. Okay, you should be allowed to speak.
Hello? I think I heard you right, but I believe you were talking about the COCs. So my concern was regarding COCs. I want to talk today about favoritism that's happening inside of our own continuum of cares. The same COCs that's supposed to protect the homeless community, not protect the power, but not protect the funding streams. They're not protecting the people. For years, I've watched decisions being made behind closed doors, positions being created for certain people, while the rest of us, especially those with real lived experience, are told these positions don't exist. I've watched opportunities magically appear for individuals who agree with the agenda of the mayor, the city manager, and the people that are in power. I'm sorry, this is not representation, it's not equality, it's not transparency, it's favoritism, and we're exhausted with it here in Fresno. We've been standing up against our COC. We've been asking for their help on several different incidents, from criminalization to even the respite that you guys spoke about earlier today. Back in May, I had went to my city and my COC and begged for help regarding the misuse of funds, the abuse that was happening inside the shelter. For months, I was ignored until just recently when it became press conference, when these individuals didn't show up. It became this big, huge statewide press conference, and now it seems that a lot of people want to speak up on it. But my concern is, how come when I came to them back in May and June and July, why were we ignored with the concerns that we had regarding our respites or individuals that are coming into our city? So I'm just wondering, who do we talk to regarding the favoritism that we are seeing within side of our COCs, and they're ignoring the people with the that need the resources. They're not listening to us. And I just want to know, who do we reach out to when our COC is not listening to us?
Kimberly Lewis, you should be able to voice your comment.
Great. Hi, everyone. Kim Lewis, representing the California Coalition for Youth, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide some comments today. I just wanted to uplift a couple things that were discussed around the data working group, and would really love to see that, our attention on our young people are paying attention in terms of getting the information that's required in statute around the work of the council to collect data and set goals for youth experiencing homelessness and ending that exposure, including, those young people who are exiting institutions and systems and who end up homeless. We are spending a lot of money in those different areas and would like to see that the resources that are being currently spent are intending to have positive outcomes, that those young people don't experience homelessness either, and impact systems where there is limited funding. Given the working group comments, I really hope that they can continue and see how that moves forward, whatever direction that the council or the executive director takes. But really think there's some important work that needs to be uplifted given everything going on at the federal level and some of the challenges that we're particularly seeing, especially for many of our trans young people, or LGBT youth, who are being very targeted, and a lot of federal mandates that are coming out that are really unfortunately not being representative of how we view our youth and their identities, and so respecting those identities and other some kind of stuff earlier. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Earlier. No more hands. I'll give it another second. Then back to Megan for the second.
Thank you, Giselle, and thank you for hanging in there with us, members of the public and council. Before we wrap up, I just want to acknowledge our very own executive assistant, Karen Perry, will be retiring. She is the first retirement from Cal ICH, which should tell you. So just want to, Karen, just read this to you, but with deep appreciation, Cal ICH, the council honors you. I'm gonna get emotional because she's my my little security blanket. Everybody loves a good executive assistant, but Karen is amazing. For your exceptional dedication, professionalism, and unwavering commitment to our mission to prevent an unhomelessness in California. Thank you for your steadiness, your care, and your clarity that you brought to this work every day. We wish you joy and fulfillment in your well-earned retirement and extend our heartfelt gratitude for the lessons that you've left off. Thank you, Karen. It was her birthday also on the 1st, and our other Sagittarius has sense of birthday. All right. Which is great. All right, so with that, this meeting of the California Interagency Council on Homelessness is adjourned at 3:42 p.m. Our next meeting will be March 4th, 2026 from 1 to 4 p.m. We will need another location for that meeting. This building is not available. Allenby is not available. Looking at you, Calvet, for some bomb shelter options I think that exist there. Thank you all for joining us. To receive up-to-date information, please subscribe to our email list. Happy holidays, happy New Year, and thank you all for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Yeah, okay.
I was like, hey, thank you, good job. I could not also. I understand.